This is the new generation GWM Haval Jolion Hybrid. It's got a new look, a new body on top, in fact, but the same powertrain as before and the same interior too. So is it a good hybrid? Well, it is a cheap hybrid. In fact, the prices have just dropped. So let me tell you all about it in this review. If you've already subscribed, thanks very much. Let's get to it. Pricing for this new generation Jolion hybrid range has actually dropped, and that is good news for consumers. In fact, there's a new entry-level version available. It starts at just $32,990 drive away, so it's actually not that much more than what you'd pay for an MG3 hybrid hatchback, but a very different proposition to that kind of car. Now, $32,990 drive away, that's an assertive price point, but there have been some corners cut in order to achieve that price. It gets halogen headlights on the base model. Don't love that. Should have LEDs in my opinion. It also gets a torsion beam rear suspension instead of the more sophisticated multi-link system that you get in the higher grade versions. And you also miss out on a couple of speakers on the inside. It's got a 4-speaker sound system and a smaller driver info screen as well. But you're still getting really good features like 17-inch alloy wheels and a 10.25-inch screen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You get cloth seat trim as well, so it's not necessarily feeling as special as if you spend a bit more and get into the Luxe grade, which is the mid-spec model. It's still a pretty assertively priced car, and in fact $1,000 cheaper than it was before, and it gets things like LED lights at the front. You get a fake leather interior trim, and you're also getting heated front seats and a bigger touchscreen media system, still with wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it looks and feels a bit more special, I reckon. And then there's this one here, which is the Ultra, the high spec version, which adds even more for your money. Things that you will really like the panoramic glass roof. You also get cooled front seats, which adds to the niceness factor on warm days. You get electric driver's seat and passenger seat adjustment, but still no memory settings in this car. And while all versions do come with a push button start system and keyless entry, it's only on the driver's side door, and that means that it can be a little bit less practical than some other cars in this segment, which might have proximity unlocking where you just walk up to the car and it unlocks all the doors for you, or some of them have keyless entry on all the doors. And also, no version of the Jolion hybrid comes with an electric boot, which could be annoying for families who have their arms full all the time. I can relate. All right, let's talk about some alternatives to this car, shall we? So if you're looking for a small SUV and you want it to be hybrid, well, there are a few options for you. Unfortunately, if you're shopping on this kind of budget, you can't consider the Toyota Corolla Cross because it is a bit more expensive, but there is the Yaris Cross, which is smaller than this and also has a pretty frugal powertrain. In fact, the claimed fuel consumption is around 4 litres per 100 Ks, and it is actually pretty achievable, let me tell you. I've driven it a few times in the past and I really like the hybrid powertrain. It's pretty raspy, a little bit raucous at times, so not necessarily the most refined powertrain compared to this especially, but it does stack up pretty well in terms of spec and standard gear as well if you shop up higher in the range. The lower spec ones are a bit basic. What about something that isn't hybrid but is super duper fuel efficient? How about the Volkswagen T-Cross? Now, pricing for it has just been updated, a little bit more expensive because that's the facelifted version that's now available, and it does seem to be a pretty decent deal because you are getting a Volkswagen, and that means you're getting something that drives beautifully and also has a real world efficient turbo petrol engine with a dual clutch automatic transmission. So it might not necessarily be ideal if you are looking to take a step into the world of electrification, but hey, you can get real world fuel consumption around 5 litres per 100 for that car, and it's super practical as well. And there's a few different versions available too, including a sporty looking one, which might suit your desires. And hey, if you are thinking electrification is where you're heading anyway, why take the middle ground and go with a hybrid and just go for something electric? Well, I've got a couple of options you might want to consider. They aren't necessarily SUV-ish, but they are small. So the MG4 is one that I thoroughly thoroughly recommend you go and check out. It might be a little bit austere on the inside, but it drives beautifully and it starts at less than $40,000 drive away. And then there's the BYD Dolphin, which is kind of a slightly smaller model, and it does have a decent EV driving range and plenty of wow factor to the interior. You might not love the interior, but it is a spacious place to sit for such a small car, has decent range, and it actually could be a really good companion for you and your family if you're looking for something that's very small and electric and you plan to basically spend a lot of time in the urban environment. Now, I've actually done a full detailed comparison test between the MG4 and the BYD Dolphin. Don't pay too much attention to the pricing in the video, which you'll find the link for in the description, because the prices have dropped for those as well. Isn't this a crazy world? Prices are dropping on cars. How good's that? This new version of the Jolion is built on the same platform as before. So it's got the same wheelbase, but it's wider across the body, and it's also a completely new body. So it's got a different length to it compared to the last one, and very different design, as you can see for yourself. Now, there are some elements of the design that I don't love, like these little flicks that you get across the body and this black plastic finishing that runs around the body, and also at the back you've got those flicks as well. And I also really don't like this black rear spoiler. To me, it just looks a little bit too try-hard, and in fact the gloss black finishing around the body of this car is not to my taste. But you tell me what you think in the comments. I actually think that the back end design looks pretty stylish, and apart from that rear diffuser at the bottom looking a little bit too sporty wannabe. But let's look in the boot. Like I said, no version comes with an electric tailgate, but you can see for yourself that there's a bigger issue here. It's the boot space. It is far smaller than the previous version of this car. Things have been reconfigured a little bit, so it does have a much smaller boot than the last generation version. You still don't get a spare wheel either. So look, it could be a big no-no for you if you are looking for a car that's more practical than this. But you do get a cargo cover in this spec, not in the base model. And in the back you get LED lights. There's also little storage sections on the side of the boot on both sides. And there is a shopping bag hook there as well, but it's sort of in the wrong spot, because if you've got a bag of shopping, it might not actually be held in place quite as well as it could be. Now, what do you think about that? Is that going to be a deal breaker for you? I think it might be for me and my family, because it's not quite a big enough boot for the size of this car, in my opinion. And just have a look at this. What the hell is going on there? That is not nice. Now, if you own or have driven the existing version of the Jolion Hybrid, it's going to feel super duper familiar to you in here, because this interior has not changed compared to the previous version, not in any meaningful way anyway. And I mean, to a degree, that's good. In some other ways, not so much. So let's talk about what you're getting as standard in this high grade version. As I mentioned, you get the bigger touchscreen media system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but you have to plug in for it. It's not wireless, which is not ideal. And there are a bunch of menus upon menus in this screen that you will want to get used to. I'll tell you a little bit more about the safety settings in the driving section coming up. But look, it's not necessarily a feature-rich design. It is basic in some ways, and sort of going to be better if you're just using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But you do have to do a fair bit through this screen, in fact. So if you want to have your adjustments to your temperature for your air conditioning or your fan speed, there are no buttons for that. So you have to go through the screen to adjust things like that. So you have to touch the screen for your fan speed, touch the screen for your temperature control, but there's also the option of saying those commands using voice control. I just never have any luck with it. It seems to always fail on me, and other people seem to think that it's the best thing that's ever happened to them. I don't know. You tell me what you think. Right, so you've also got a driver info screen as well. It has quite a bit of info on it available to you, but it's certainly not the most user-friendly experience in terms of controlling the menus on the screen. And to control elements of that screen, you use these controls on the steering wheel, these ones here. You've got your cruise controls there on the buttons now too, and your volume and tuning for your stereo on this side as well. So look, I don't think it's necessarily terrible, but it maybe could be a little bit better in some usability aspects. Now, there's one other thing right here that I want to talk about. This is your driver monitoring camera. So that has a little camera in there that keeps an eye on your eyes to make sure that you're paying attention, but it seems to get it wrong a lot. Now, one other thing I want to call out, this high grade version now gets this ambient light stuff in the doors, and that will actually change color when the music or a podcast is on. That might be something your kids love or you think is cool. Right, so what about practicality elements of this cabin? Look, there are a couple of good things. You've got a wireless phone charger in this grade. There's a couple of storage, I guess you'd call them channels almost. There's not really usable, those spaces. You've got the same rotary dial as before, and it doesn't have a stopper on it, so you could endlessly twirl it, and that gets a little bit annoying in my opinion. There's also a pair of cup holders between the seats, which you can cover up if you're not using them, and a covered center console bin as well. Bottle holders are there in the doors. You've got a glove box, which is a reasonable size, and you've also got this fake leather interior trim, which does look pretty good and feel decent enough, I reckon. And above here, there's also a sunglasses holder as well. You've got your sunroof controls, because yes, this version does get the beautiful sunroof. Look at that beautiful blue sky day. Isn't that nice? And you've also got an auto dimming rear vision mirror as well. Vanity mirrors with lights too, so that's good to know. You can keep an eye on your appearance, and you can also keep an eye on what's happening on the road, because there's a dash cam plug up there. Yes, a USB plug, so you can connect up a dash cam without having messy cables everywhere. Oh, also this version does come with a head-up display, which is great to see. Right, so let's see if the backseat space is good too. This might be niche upon niche, but if you've got really tall teenagers and you're looking for a tiny little car, well, this could be ideal for you. Look at this. I'm 6 foot tall and I've got inches and inches of legroom in front of me, heaps of footroom as well, with this seat set for my 6 foot driving position. And just have a look at the headroom as well. There is no issue in terms of headroom. If you're 6'4", 6'5", you're still fitting in the back of this car, even with this big panoramic glass roof, which does add some wow factor. So yeah, in terms of backseat space, it's pretty good, I reckon. You've also got ISOFIX points in the window seats if you have younger ones, and also 3 top tether points. And also, I love the fact that this car gets a little Velcro cover for where you plug in your ISOFIX for your child seat, because it means less mess, right? There's also a flip down armrest with cup holders in this spec, and I like the fact that you also get a pair of directional air vents, USB-A ports, which is a little bit backwards. Most cars have USB-C these days, and also there's a little storage tray down there. There's map pockets on the seat backs as well, and the space in here is very, very good. You're also getting things like lights in the back here as well for reading, and grab handles too, which is good to see. And yes, it is a super ridiculously practical backseat space for the size of this car. I just wish they'd prioritized a bit more boot space instead of back seat space. It would have made a lot of difference, I reckon. Under the bonnet of the GWM Haval Jolion is a 1.5 litre 4-cylinder non-turbocharged petrol engine, which teams up to an electric motor and a battery pack to offer pretty decent power and torque figures. You'll see the combined numbers on your screen now, and they are massive for a small SUV. Now, it isn't light is the other consideration here, so I'll put the weight on the screen for you. It has a dedicated hybrid transmission, which is a bit of a quirky transmission. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in the driving section, and it only comes as a front-wheel drive. And if you're wondering, I'm going to put some towing details on your screen as well. Tell me what you think about those in the comments section. So what's it like to drive the Haval Jolion Hybrid? Yeah, mostly pretty good. I mean, to a degree. There are some elements that really shit me about this car. Things like the safety systems, primarily, actually, it's primarily the safety systems that annoy me. They've got an oversensitivity to them that really does make for a distracting and dislikable drive experience in a lot of different situations. And what I'm talking about mainly is this driver monitoring camera, which keeps an eye on your eyes and is supposedly designed to tell you when you're not paying attention, you're distracted or fatigued. But honestly, when you're just trying to be cautious and keep an eye on your surroundings, at times that can trigger the camera to beep and beep and beep, and it really, really gets on my nerves. You have to turn it off every single time you drive the car if you don't like it. And also, that's the same thing for the emergency lane keeping, or keep on urgent, as the system calls it. It's just a poorly calibrated system, in my opinion. It's just a bit too pushy, and really does make for a less than joyful drive experience, just because it's interventional and actually not as passive in terms of its integration as it probably could be to make this a more likable drive experience. It's certainly not the absolute ideal when it comes to the drive experience and the safety technology implementation. But hey, if you're the sort of person who's stepping out of something that's much older and much less safe, you might actually find all those features to be actually quite likable and quite enjoyable. But to me, spending just a little bit of time in this car already, no, I don't like it. And that's my opinion, right? Okay, so what about other elements of this drive experience? Well, there is some good stuff, right? So you've got a pretty good powertrain, I have to say. This little 1.5 petrol electric unit is definitely well catered to this sort of application. So what I'm enjoying about it is the way that it will switch between electric and petrol without too much fuss. Once it switches back to petrol, it makes a bit of noise, but that's to be expected in a lot of hybrid applications. But I have to say that it is pretty smooth in the way that it behaves. It's got a dedicated hybrid transmission, which is actually a 2-speed auto, which is a bit weird. Sort of similar in the way it behaves to a CVT automatic. So it'll rev out a little bit more than you might expect it to when you put your foot down, but it does have a level of driving ease and enjoyment that you do not get if you buy the petrol only versions of the Jolion, because they have a less than lovable dual clutch transmission and a less than perfect turbo-petrol engine, which in combination with one another make for a dire drive experience, in my opinion. I really don't like the petrol versions of this car to drive, but this one, I'm actually much more open to. It is a far better drive experience. Just like with the Haval H6, the bigger model, I thought that the hybrid was better for it too. Same thing here in the Jolion, which is the smaller one. Right, so what about other elements of the drive experience? You might be surprised to learn that this has a really decent drive experience. It's got a long wheelbase, and that means that it does have a smooth ride, which is great to see, because in some other small SUVs, they can feel pitchy and lumpy and bumpy, whereas this, I'm going over my bumpy street. It's not actually my street, it's just a street near me that's lumpy and bumpy, and it does even things out nicely because it's got such a big gap between the wheels. It does have a coasting motion over lots of little inconsistencies in the surface, and I like that about it. And as for the steering, well, I have to say it's not too bad. It's pretty honest in terms of the responsiveness and the weighting, and that means that it basically is pretty trustworthy in terms of its behavior in corners. So if you approach a corner with a bit too much pace, you can correct things pretty easily without it feeling like you don't have control. And it does have pretty decent tires as well on this spec, at least. I'm not sure about the base grade. They might have cheaped out on those as well. Yes, it does have a regen braking system, of course, because it's hybrid. It doesn't have the same level of adjustability as some other cars out there, and there is no B mode, so you can basically strategize a bit more about your regen braking. It's just regen, it's just there, and it does have an effect on the drive experience to a degree, but it's not a huge effect like some other hybrids. And also, thankfully, it still has a pretty honest brake pedal feel. So when you put your foot down, there's no airiness to the pedal, it just actually grabs pretty quickly. I like that. I think that for the most part, the hybrid powertrain does make for a more joyful Jolion experience than the petrol versions. And for those who are looking for something that does have the efficiency thing on its side, well, maybe it will tick the box for you. Let me talk about efficiency now, actually. Okay, on your screen you'll see the official combined cycle fuel consumption figure for the Jolion Hybrid model range, and that is just a smidge higher than the previous generation version. Strangely enough, it's gone up in fuel consumption, which is not ideal, I don't think. Now, in terms of real world fuel consumption, well, I've had this car for a couple of days. I've done the usual stuff that I do in my test cars, urban driving, a bit of freeway and highway and open road, just to see what the car's like and live with it, how you might live with your car, and here's what I've seen. And look, I think that that's okay, but certainly not as efficient as something that you might see if you buy the Yaris Cross Hybrid or the Corolla Cross Hybrid or the Hyundai Kona Hybrid or the Volkswagen T-Cross or Skoda Kamiq, which are both non-hybrid but turbocharged and very, very efficient. Look, I just think that it does have hybrid technology as part of it. It's certainly powerful because of that hybrid tech, but it maybe isn't as efficient as I was expecting it to be in terms of real world fuel consumption numbers. The existing version of the Jolion Hybrid came with a maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating from 2022, and I expect that that will carry over to this new version because, well, a lot of the stuff carries over, and it does have things that you would expect in 2024, and that does include some annoying tech, unfortunately. There is good stuff: autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist and junction detection, there's adaptive cruise control, there's blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, a reversing camera and parking sensors on the base model, and if you choose the Lux or the Ultra, you get a surround view camera as well. Now, the annoying stuff, well, there's a driver monitoring camera system which beeps and bongs and really is wrong in terms of telling you when you're not paying attention, apparently. There's also a speed sign recognition system, and the emergency lane keep system in this car really does get it wrong quite a bit. So it might not be ideal in terms of the implementation of that technology, but at least it has the gear, and it just means that you have to turn it off if it annoys you every single time you drive the car, and that annoys me. GWM offers a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty, and if you're wondering about the hybrid battery pack, it does have a different warranty cover. You'll see the details on your screen now. Now, servicing is due every 12 months and 15,000 Ks after the first service, which is a bit shorter, just to make sure that everything's running as it should. And there's also a cap price servicing plan. For the first 5 years, you'll see the average cost on your screen now, and I think that's pretty good in terms of outlay per year for keeping your car on the road. And you also get 5 years of roadside assistance included too, which is nice. I have no doubt that this will appeal to people who are looking for a petrol-electric hybrid small SUV with plenty of features for not much money. It does stack up pretty well from that perspective, but the boot space and some of those safety features could really get on your nerves. Tell me what you think about it in the comments section below. Would you choose the new generation Jolion Hybrid? Do you own the existing one? I'd love to hear from you, and if you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe and ring the bell to keep up to date with all of my reviews. I'll see you in the next one.